Hi everyone, welcome to an episode of Conscious Alchemy or Consciousness Alchemy, where we discuss alchemy of your consciousness and what exactly that is, how to transmute patterns, how to clear patterns, how to overcome patterns, and just everyday life stuff as we traverse this roller coaster ride that we are on at this time. So today I'd like to talk about limiting belief patterns and or also creating barriers and how we can feel resistance to things, yet resistance to something doesn't necessarily mean that thing or that whatever we're feeling resistance to is a bad thing. Like how it is not necessarily always a bad thing. So for example, if you feel resistance to stepping out and doing something or changing something in your life, or procrastination, hesitation, etc., or if a particular subject comes up in your life and you feel resistance to it, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a bad thing or that doing that endeavor is bad or wrong or negative. Our resistance to performing a task or whatever it might be, it could be rooted in deeper issues of, say, opening that door to, say, performing some task or stepping out in a certain way. Perhaps in the past we've experienced some kind of negative situation regarding stuff like that. So a lot of people, for example, will have issues with just being themselves. Seems to be an issue that plagues many people. And there's all kinds of things that impress upon us how we should do or act or behave and who we should be. But who we should be is just ourselves. And we should follow what we feel in our heart and be that. And many things can get in the way of being that person or feeling that way. And one can be, our peers, our surrounding society. The other thing can also be our self-imposed beliefs, limiting belief patterns, beliefs in regards to how one should be or should not be, and also erecting barriers around us. So when we go to perform a task or do something or change an aspect of ourselves, our lives, get involved in a new activity, whatever it is, our deeply rooted traumas from this life and many lives before this life can be activated, and it can start to come up because we are now performing a task. We're now doing something that goes against a limiting belief pattern that we've chosen to believe, or it goes against something that somebody else tells us is right or wrong. And this then can cause us to feel resistance towards performing that task, that activity, stepping forward, whatever it is. Or we can also then create barriers around ourselves and tell ourselves a story why we shouldn't do this or why we shouldn't do that. And then that alleviates that feeling inside of us, any feelings of guilt that we may carry, that we may have. The barrier then that we create between us and that activity, let's say, helps to soften any emotions. So using myself as an example, in the past several months, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so with myself, the more and more that I stepped out into being that creator, creating my life, following what I feel in my heart and bringing that out, following what I feel guided to do and that I know is real guidance, as opposed to say a limiting belief pattern that can appear as we're being guided, when really it's the limiting belief pattern telling us something to believe in order to stop us. Like, for example, our ego wants to stay safe and secure, so the ego will tell us things in order to maintain that safe room that it builds for itself. And then as soon as you go to step out of that into the unknown, into something that could be challenging, step out into something that could go against a limiting belief pattern or something we've chosen to believe from the past or past lives, this then causes resistance because we're now deciding to act in a manner that we've already chosen is wrong. And then the ego, wanting to stay safe and secure to avoid a situation again or some kind of hard feelings or whatever it might be, will then tell us, don't do this because of this. Remember this hurt that you experienced before. And then from there, we can then erect barriers around ourselves. Now, back to my story. So I would say, let's go back actually a year ago. More than that, but let's just go a year ago and then forward. The more and more that I stepped into that creator role, following what I feel in my heart to do and to create, following the guidance that I receive from higher self, from the masters, and the masters that are with me, every day of my life that guide me and that I work with, the more and more that I stepped into that creator role, it brought up past life issues, cellular memory. It brought up past life, things that I agreed to that I wouldn't do anymore, or oh no, I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't do this, or in the past I received ridicule for using my skills to create a living for myself, or I've had past lives where my skills were used forcefully for the gain of somebody else, and then I had to negotiate my freedom, at some point. So stuff like that. So the more I stepped into that role, the more I started to go against past life experiences, which would be like I said, stepping out, using my skills, etc., etc. The cellular memory would come up. The past life patterning would come up. And then I could feel that in my day-to-day life. I felt it in my body, in my physical body, throughout my energetic bodies. And as I would create more and more, as I would further myself down that path, more and more resistance would come up because I'm going against things that I agreed to from past lives, or things that I decided to believe, or things that were impressed upon me, or past life issues, past life traumas, whatever. So when you feel resistance to something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It could be that it's triggering or bringing up something that you've either subconsciously, unconsciously, or in a past life have agreed to not do, or that you received ridicule over, or some kind of negative experience. So when in this life, when you start performing that task, when you start speaking your truth, when you start using your skills to create a living for yourself, which there's nothing wrong with doing, the things that you've agreed to in the past, your experiences, they come back and they come up because you're now going against something that you've agreed to. And we in this life and in every life forward, you are a product of all your lives before you. Not just on an energetic level, even on a physical level. They've proven that you carry like 20 generations or up to around 20 generations of memory in your physical body from your generations before you. Which that's definitely going to have an impact on you, especially when you try to break those. As you've heard the term generational curses. You can think of that as generational karma, ancestral karma, as well as feeling it in the physical, because we're not just energetic beings, we're not just physical beings, we're all of the above. So when you feel resistance to something, don't necessarily just discard it as that subject matter is wrong or is bad or I shouldn't do that. Most people already know things that you should probably not do, and things that really aren't bad, but we have a limiting belief pattern that tells us it's bad or it's wrong. So when you feel that resistance to something, get in touch with you and who you are. Get right down to the root of the situation. Get into your heart space regarding it and really look at that situation and find the truths of that situation for you. Because chances are it's just rooted in something you've agreed to from the past, whether it's this life or past lives. And more than likely, it's going to be your experiences in this life are connected to past life experiences. So in this life, you're being given the opportunity to clear things from your past lives. That's one reason why people's lives are so diverse. We can experience, 5 people can experience the same thing, but they're going to have different experiences of it and feelings towards it, because what they're made of, everything that's behind them that's brought them to this point in time in that moment is going to be different. So when you feel resistance to something, don't just shy away from it. Don't just pass it off as wrong. Analyze it. Take the time to get to know yourself and why you feel that way, why you feel the resistance, and learn about yourself, because you're probably just going against something that you've chosen to create a barrier between yourself and that experience or those feelings, which is a limiting belief pattern. I don't want to experience this hurt or pain or uncomfortable feelings or whatever it is, or I tried that before and failed, which there's no such thing as failure. I don't want to experience that again, quoting still. So I will just do this instead. I will create a barrier to keep me away from that hurt or that pain or that negative experience or, whatever it might be. So those are some examples of how we create barriers based off of limiting belief patterns, how our ego wants to keep itself safe and secure to avoid those situations. And don't get me wrong, nobody wants to feel hardships. Nobody wants to feel pain, anguish, any kind of negative feelings like that. But just because you're feeling that doesn't mean that you are that. Those emotions are coming up for a reason, because you're holding on to something that is generating that spark to spark those negative emotions. And as a conscious being, as an alchemist, a conscious alchemist, it's your job to transmute that, to clear it. And when you do that, you are allowing yourself, you're giving yourself permission to step into a higher version of yourself, to step into something greater and better for yourself. And that it's also releasing the old patterns, the old energy, which is going and needs to go, to allow the new to surface and to come forward more and more. So when you have resistance to something, check in with yourself. Ask yourself, why am I feeling this resistance? Where is it coming from? What have I experienced that's similar to this, that maybe ended on a bad foot, and ended with some hard feelings, and perhaps by me doing this now, I've created a barrier between myself and those feelings. Ask yourself, do I have a limiting belief pattern that is telling me that this is right or wrong, or this is, the way it should be, or whatever it is? And perhaps that limiting belief pattern needs to go because it doesn't serve me anymore. Perhaps it never served me or served you, anybody, to begin with. And it's just something that's stuck and was never consciously addressed, or you didn't notice that you were doing it, and it just became a natural reaction. Because as beings, we adapt. We become used to how we go through life, and we adapt to it, and we no longer are as conscious of something. When it becomes a regular thing, we become less conscious of it because we become accustomed to thinking or feeling a certain way. So again, that's another thing with the barriers that we create around ourselves. You can create a barrier around yourself, and maybe at the time you're aware of it, or you don't even really are aware of creating the barrier. But then over time, you just become accustomed to having that barrier around you. And then when something in life arises where you go to step past that barrier, the barrier comes up and says, nope, nope, we decided we aren't doing this anymore. We decided, we're going to stay safe and away from these emotions, these feelings, these experiences. So check in with yourself. Ask yourself, what are the barriers you're creating around yourself? And are they truly in your best interest? Perhaps they served you at a certain moment in time in your life when, avoiding a situation or avoiding a pain or an insecurity seemed to be in your best interest. And now perhaps you're in a different situation where you no longer need that barrier. You no longer need that limiting belief pattern. Why place limitations on yourself? Why place barriers around yourself? The more that you remove those barriers, the more you release those limiting belief patterns, the more you can step into a greater and more fulfilling aspect of yourself, a higher aspect of yourself. And who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want life to be better? Who doesn't want to feel better? And that really is the root of why we feel the way we do in negative ways, is because we hold on to so much. And then by holding on to something, whatever it might be, it then elicits a reaction within us. And that reaction isn't always positive. And then it brings up something negative within us. And, where goes our happiness? But at the same time, that's a blessing, because it's showing us something within us that we need to change, that we need to transmute, that we need to overcome. And by overcoming those things, those barriers, those limiting belief patterns, by removing things that are hooked into us, we become greater aspects of ourselves. So take some time and look at your life and see what areas you're erecting barriers. See what areas you still hold on to old, outdated, limiting belief patterns. And there's so many of them, here in this physical reality that we hold on to, that's just limiting us. And not just us on an individual level, but us collectively. And once, the more and more that those go, and once, for the greater amount of those limiting belief patterns go, collectively and individually, we're able to step into a much higher aspect and the greatness that can come from that. So check in with yourself. And if you're having a hard time clearing something, like if you're conscious of a pattern and you're having a hard time busting through it, I highly recommend that people, I can't stress enough how people should get more and more into some kind of energetic, metaphysical practice and routine, so they can help break up those blockages, those energetic blockages. Like, think about your physical body. If there's, blockages in your body, you do something to help alleviate those blockages and remove them and help get your body flowing better and working better. Well, now think on an energetic level. You're going to carry blockages in your energy, and it's not always enough to just have like an aha moment or to be aware of a pattern. That's not always enough. You have to work at those blockages and have something done to them, to release them, to remove them, to get the energy flowing again. Think of energy as like a river system, and then your blockages could be massive boulders and rocks and dams that fill up in the river system and block and impede the flow of the river. So the more your energy is able to flow and harmonize, the easier life becomes, the easier your day-to-day life also becomes, and the easier it becomes to become more conscious of yourself, because you're no longer dealing with a blockage and the ramifications or the byproducts of that blockage in your energetic bodies. So whether it's let's say the emotional or the mental body, by working on those blockages, or having somebody work on those blockages, or learning how to work on those blockages, you're helping yourself out so much more. It's like getting a personal trainer. Like, so many people want to get healthier and want to get, physically healthier and eat healthy and exercise, and going out and learning the appropriate tools to do that, not just for like a small, 3 month, you know, what do they call them? A 3 month exercise routine, and then you're done, but learning how to live that lifestyle to make it long term and lifelong. It's the same with your energy. Learning the skills and the tools to change your life, to change your energetic field, that's going to stay with you throughout your life. And there's many, many people out there that can do that for you. And you don't have to take it to that extent. You can just receive, have people, energy workers, energy healers, there's all different kinds out there. You can just have them work on you, and they can assist you in other ways, and advice, etc., etc. But I highly recommend that people really need to start looking at their energetic side and learning what they can do for their energetic health instead of just their physical health, because you are all of that in the physical. We've just become, so much more separated from it. So there's a few pointers for you. I hope that helps out, and stay tuned for the next episode of Conscious Alchemy.